What we are seeing across the Caribbean since last year and this year is a total absence of political and moral leadership, specifically in regards to the failure of elected officials and prominent regional organizations like CARICOM to speak out against the increasingly criminal blockade and embargo of Cuba, the imperialist attacks against Venezuela, which include the violation of Venezuela's sovereignty that resulted in the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and the First Lady, Celia Flores, by the United States. The U.S. imperialist attacks and visions for Cuba have only been emboldened by the lack of regional response to the imperialist attack against Venezuela. Going beyond the issue of solidarity, Cuba and Venezuela have arguably been the biggest contributors of progressive development to the region in terms of material support for the past 60 and 40 years respectively. The silence in too much of the Caribbean region amidst the imperialist attack on Venezuela cannot be allowed against Cuba. On this question of the unpayable debt of real solidarity, Pambuzaka's recent special issue highlights that it belongs to those who have benefited from Cuban solidarity and have yet to respond in kind. The executive order issued by the U.S. on January 29th outlines some of the trends in U.S. President Donald Trump's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, aptly titled the Monroe Doctrine. And as Cuba's Consul General just reminded, this harks back to long colonial ambitions of the U.S. against islands in the region. To be clear, the Monroe Doctrine is both a method and an imperialist strategy in the Western Hemisphere that seeks directly to force compliance of states so that they alter their internal and external policies in ways that suits the interests of the United States. It is tolerated amongst a large swath of U.S. government officials in the U.S. state apparatus itself, given an overall agreement with the Trump administration's attempt to reassert U.S. hegemony against a perceived challenge by China. For the Caribbean Solidarity Network, the current iteration of U.S. militarism and imperialism in the region is part of its historical and long-term foreign policy to blatantly undermine state sovereignty in the region through economic warfare, psychological warfare, and military violations of state sovereignty. This time is in the past through bombings, invasions, kidnappings, assassinations, extrajudicial murders, terrorism, and weapons testing. It is our duty to be in real solidarity with Cuba by opposing imperialism in our region and fighting alongside Cubans in their struggle against continued U.S. imperialist aggression in the Caribbean and elsewhere. It is our duty to remind the world that Caribbean people have a material interest in being anti-imperialist, and it is for this reason that the United States has targeted Cuba for decades as they shine as a bright beacon, reminding us, especially Caribbean people, of that fact.